Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Eerie Hour. Cruise ships are often called floating cities, filled with lights, music, and the promise of relaxation. But sometimes they become the stage for terrifying mysteries. When passengers vanish without warning, when crew members stumble onto things they never should have seen, and when strange events unfold that can't be explained, the sea feels far less safe than we are led to believe. Tonight, you'll hear 10 chilling stories from passengers and crew, each one more unsettling than the last, each backed up by reports and testimonies that even maritime authorities struggle to explain. These aren't stories about storms or broken engines. These are encounters with things that simply should not exist on ships built for luxury and comfort. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe to Eerie Hour for daily true horror stories that are meant to keep you awake long into the night. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss when the shadows begin to move. Working cruise ship security for Royal Caribbean taught me that most passenger issues follow a familiar script. People slip on wet decks, complain about missing items from their staterooms, or need emergency medical care that requires a Coast Guard evacuation. After 18 months of patrolling the symphony of the seas, I knew the rhythm of shipboard life and how security fits into it. Guest services takes complaints, medical staff handles health problems, and security responds to rule-breaking and safety threats. Every possible situation had a procedure. But during a 7-day Western Caribbean sailing in March 2023, something happened that no manual had prepared us for. Something so strange that even corporate never admitted it fully in writing. One of our passengers was a woman named Jalen Morrison. She had booked stateroom 8247, an inside cabin with no windows, twin beds, and about 150 square feet of space. According to the manifest, she was 28, from Portland, Oregon, and traveling alone on her very first cruise. She checked in normally at Fort Lauderdale, passed all security checks, posed for her ID photo, and received her pass card for room access and purchases. Her luggage was cleared. She showed up at the muster drill like everyone else and had no special requests or dietary needs. Just a typical solo traveler. The first odd report came on day 2. Housekeeper Maria Santos knocked on Jalen's door for cleaning but got no answer. Using her master key, she entered and found the cabin empty but disturbed. The twin beds, which had been set together the day before, were now pulled apart. Clothes and personal items were scattered on the floor instead of neatly placed in drawers or shelves. The bathroom looked freshly used, yet the towels remained folded. Most unsettling was the temperature. Cabins are set at 72 degrees, but her thermostat read 64 degrees, even though there was no record of her changing it. Maria reported the issue, maintenance checked, and the system showed no errors. They reset the thermostat and moved on. When I read the report that evening, I didn't think much of it. Solo travelers can be messy, and climate systems sometimes glitch. I logged it and went on with my patrols. That night, Jalen showed up for dinner in the main dining room. The waitstaff remembered her as quiet but polite. She ordered prime rib, drank 2 glasses of wine, and joined in small talk about excursions for Cozumel the next day. Her table mates described her as friendly, but a little tired. Later, she bought more drinks at the piano bar and returned to her cabin just before midnight. All normal, or so it seemed. But day 3 brought the next strange event. At 6:47 a.m., Jalen called guest services saying she had heard loud banging against the wall from the next cabin, 8249, that went on for over an hour. I went to investigate. That cabin belonged to Harold and Margaret Chun, an older couple from Vancouver who had cruised with us before. They were polite, quiet people. When I knocked at 7:15, Harold answered already dressed. They both insisted they had slept peacefully and heard nothing strange. Their cabin looked tidy, the beds used, and no signs of furniture moved. I explained Jalen's complaint, and they seemed genuinely confused. I noted it as a possible misunderstanding, but Jalen was insistent. She described the sounds in detail, steady, rhythmic, impossible to ignore. She didn't come across as someone seeking attention. I offered her the option to move cabins, but she declined, saying she wanted to stay. Then she asked a chilling question. Did cameras monitor the hallway outside her door? I confirmed there were cameras in every public corridor, but I couldn't release footage without authorization. Things escalated on day 4. A passenger across the hall in cabin A245 reported that their television wasn't showing the normal ship channel lineup. Instead, it was displaying what looked like live security footage. I went with a technician to check. On their screen was a corridor with doors numbered in the 8200s, clearly Deck 8, but the design of the carpet and walls didn't quite match. The timestamp showed it was current. As we watched, a figure in a maintenance uniform moved door to door, pausing to lean close to peepholes, listening. The technician tried to reset the system, but discovered the signal wasn't coming from the ship's entertainment feed at all. It was being streamed through the cabin's internet connection. Someone had hacked into the ship's network and was pushing security footage onto random televisions. This wasn't just creepy. It was a major security breach. .by now, I was certain Jalen's reports were connected. The strange cabin disturbances, the noises, the hacked footage, all centered on her room. That night, I set up in an alcove near the elevators with a clear line of sight to her corridor. At 11:30, I saw someone in a maintenance uniform approach her door and slip inside with what looked like a master key. I waited a few minutes before going in. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the maintenance worker was going through Jalen's suitcase, carefully laying out her belongings, photographing them, and then putting them back. Everything about it felt rehearsed. When I demanded an explanation, he claimed to be handling a cleaning work order, but couldn't show paperwork. He gave me a name and ID number that turned out to be fake. He wasn't on our crew manifest at all. Backup arrived, and we secured him. His uniform was a near-perfect replica, but with small mistakes. A printed name tag, cheap fabric, and a photocopied ID badge. In his bag, we found lockpicks, data drives, and floor plans of passenger decks. He had multiple key cards and photos of belongings from other cabins. He wasn't a cleaner. He was conducting surveillance. We turned him over to authorities when we docked, but even the Coast Guard couldn't match his fingerprints. Whoever he was, he had managed to board undetected, blend in his crew, and stalk passengers, mostly women traveling alone in inside cabins. Jalen was moved to another room under protection, and for the rest of the voyage, extra patrols were added. The incident forced us to rethink security entirely. At first, her reports looked like minor annoyances, a messy cabin, odd noises. But together, they exposed a much darker operation. Cruise ships don't just face drunk passengers or medical problems. They face infiltrators who can use the ship's systems against people. After the incident, new rules were put in place for verifying crew identity and training security staff to spot false credentials. Federal authorities later identified the man, but his background and motives remained sealed. What mattered most was what the case revealed: that the line between safety and danger on the open sea is much thinner than passengers realize. For anyone booking an inside cabin on a cruise ship, let this story serve as a warning. If you notice your room colder than usual, if you hear knocks or bangs in the night, if your things look disturbed, or if you feel watched, report it. What seems like nothing may be part of something far more serious. Cruise ships are built to feel like escapes from the real world, but sometimes the shadows follow passengers aboard. The case file remains open, and though officials classified it as resolved, the truth is more unsettling. Security on cruise ships exists in a fragile balance, and when it fails, the results can be terrifying. Music. After 23 years working as a cruise director, I thought I had seen every kind of passenger confusion. Modern ships are massive, some with nearly 20 decks, hundreds of staterooms, and corridors stretching the length of football fields. People get lost constantly, asking guest services for directions to dining rooms, theaters, or even their own cabins. It's so common it barely registers. The Norwegian Epic carries more than 4,000 guests, and every day, dozens of them stop by just to ask where to go. But what passenger Kaylin Reeves told us on a Mediterranean sailing in October 2023 wasn't simple confusion. It was something else, something that made me question what I thought I knew about the very design of the ship itself. Kaylin booked a balcony stateroom on Deck 9, cabin 9847, for a 2-week voyage from Barcelona to Miami. Unlike Jalen, she was an experienced cruiser, Over 8 years of voyages, many different ships, and always traveling alone. She preferred quiet evenings, late dining, and observation long. ES over shows or activities. She knew her way around. That's why it struck me when, on day 4, she came to guest services looking unsettled. She said she had found a quiet deck one evening, a hidden space with a library and chairs, perfect for reading. But the next night, she couldn't find it again. She walked every corridor, every staircase, retracing her steps, and yet the deck seemed to have disappeared. Guest services staff looked through the ship's deck plans and suggested a few possibilities. Maybe the library on Deck 5, the observation lounge up on Deck 14, or one of the quieter seating areas scattered throughout the ship. But Kaylin immediately shook her head. She said none of those places matched what she had seen. Her description was detailed and unusual enough that it caught my attention as soon as guest services shared it with me. She explained that the space had floor-to-ceiling windows stretching across the entire forward section of the deck, giving panoramic ocean views she had never found anywhere else on the ship. The lighting came from fixtures she hadn't seen on other vessels, and the furniture wasn't the usual cruise ship chairs or couches. It consisted of individual reading pods, private and oddly futuristic. What stood out the most was her claim that the elevator had stopped at Deck 7 to reach this place, even though Deck 7 was supposed to be off-limits, reserved only for crew quarters and restricted offices. Curious, I offered to take her personally to clear up the confusion. The Norwegian Epic's design is standard for its class. Deck 7 is crew territory only, filled with staff rooms, offices, and service areas. Passengers can't reach it without authorization. The elevators themselves are programmed to skip over the floor entirely, showing Deck 6 and then 8 with no option for 7. Even if someone tried, the software blocks the stop and crew coup. Why cards are required for access? But when Kaylin and I stepped into the elevator, she pressed the button for Deck 7 anyway, insisting it had worked before. To my surprise, the button lit up and the elevator moved down. The screen clearly displayed 7 as we arrived, and with the usual ding, the doors slid open. What we stepped into was not a crew hallway at all, but a wide, well-lit corridor that looked like the passenger decks. Elegant carpeting ran under our feet. The walls were decorated, and the ambient lighting glowed warmly. Instantly, I knew this shouldn't be possible. Passengers should never, under any condition, have direct elevator access to crew space. And yet here we were, standing on Deck 7 with no barriers. At first glance, it looked almost normal, but then the details started to bother me. The ceilings felt slightly higher than standard. The corridors seemed wider than those I had walked 100 times before. Even the carpet design looked like the ship's patterns, but with odd variations in color that I had never seen on this vessel. Kaylin confidently led me forward, saying the library she had found was at the front end of the deck. I tried to match our path to the ship's official layout in my head, but the distances didn't add up. We were walking farther than the ship should physically allow. When I pointed this out, Kaylin looked puzzled, insisting the design seemed perfectly ordinary to her. And then we arrived. The library was there exactly as she had described it. Huge glass windows stretched across the bow, showing sweeping views of the sea. Unusual lighting fixtures glowed above us, and the furniture was made of individual reading pods arranged in an inviting layout. It looked real, solid, and entirely out of place. But according to everything I knew about the Norwegian Epic, this space was impossible. Crew quarters and offices were supposed to fill this section of Deck 7. The ship had never advertised or built anything like this. It matched the style of the rest of the ship, but did not exist on any blueprint, plan, or record. I radioed the bridge for confirmation, asking the internal system to pinpoint our exact location. The reply came back quickly. According to their instruments, I was standing in crew administrative offices. Yet the reality in front of me was an elegant passenger library. The contradiction made no sense. To get clarity, I called the chief engineer to meet us. He arrived 15 minutes later using the crew elevator, stepping into the same space Kaylin and I were in. But while we saw the library, he looked around and swore we were standing in a plain office space with desks, filing cabinets, and fluorescent lights. To him, nothing was out of the ordinary. When I asked him to describe specific objects, what he pointed to didn't exist for us. Likewise, when we described the plush pods and the massive windows, he insisted he saw no such thing. We were standing in the exact same spot, but experiencing two completely different realities. For nearly half an hour, this strange overlap continued as we tried to test what was happening. We even took photographs on our personal devices. In mine and Kalen's, the images showed the library just as we saw it. But in the engineer's photos, taken at the same time, in the same place, the picture showed nothing but the dull office space he described. It was as if two different worlds had layered themselves on top of each other. The engineer's radio reports to his crew confirmed everything seemed normal on their end. And from their perspective, Deck 7 functioned as always. No disturbances, no access issues, nothing out of place. But from where we stood, the impossible library stretched before us. I decided the only way forward was to map this strange deck myself. Using my master key card, which opened almost every area of the ship, I began walking its length to compare what we saw with what should exist. The results were unsettling. The passenger version of Deck 7 contained not just the library, but also a small cafe, quiet lounges, and extended corridors. The problem was that these areas had no counterparts in the ship's design. Worse, the deck itself seemed larger than the ship's dimensions should allow. Corridors extended farther than the hull should stretch, and the total floor space exceeded the ship's physical limits. Yet every step felt solid, real, and undeniable. During this exploration, Kalen and I weren't alone. We ran into 3 other passengers who were casually using these hidden spaces. They were reading, sipping coffee, or just relaxing, with no hint of confusion. When asked, they described the same amenities we saw: the windows, the furniture, the atmosphere. They spoke as if the library had always been there, as if it were just another part of the ship. But when I later tried to track them in the passenger manifest, things got stranger. The names they gave didn't line up perfectly with the official records. Some were close, but not exact matches. It was as though these passengers existed only partly in our system, half visible on paper, but fully present on that impossible deck. Though the names were similar, the cabin numbers tied to them were real passenger rooms. But when I checked those rooms, the actual occupants had no idea about visiting Deck 7 or using any sort of hidden library. This meant that the people we spoke with were either giving false information or were not the same as the official passengers listed in the system. Things became even stranger when I realized Kalen wasn't the only one who had this type of experience. Going through old guest service reports from the last 6 months, I found several records of passengers describing areas and facilities that were not part of the ship's official design. Each of those reports had been brushed off at the time as passed, angers being lost or confused. But when I looked at them together, they clearly showed a repeating pattern. People kept finding places that technically should not exist at all. After I submitted my report, corporate headquarters ordered a full inspection. Naval architects and marine engineers were sent to examine Deck 7 in detail. They brought advanced equipment to measure structures, check layouts, and compare everything against the ship's original blueprints. According to their results, Deck 7 was exactly what it was supposed to be: crew areas, offices, storage, and nothing more. No signs of secret passenger spaces, no strange modifications, and no hidden construction. On paper, everything matched perfectly, but during their survey, the team began experiencing odd issues. Some of their tools gave inconsistent results, with measurements changing even when taken from the same spot twice. Structural scanners detected load-bearing layouts that didn't match what they were seeing in front of them. Even stranger, a few of the team members admitted they thought they saw glimpses of furniture and fixtures that had no business being in crew quarters, though nothing could be captured on their instruments to prove it. This situation quickly turned into a serious problem for safety and passenger operations. If guests really were slipping into restricted areas through faulty elevators or hidden pathways, that meant huge security risks, possible violations, and liability issues. But if something entirely different was happening, something that couldn't be explained. There was no clear rule book to follow. Maritime safety laws don't prepare crews for situations where people physically see and experience things that don't exist in official plans. Company policies gave no instructions either, leaving us in a gray zone where nothing made sense. We eventually had to come up with a compromise. I see. Passengers like Kalen, who claimed to find the secret deck, were told that these areas might only be occasionally open due to ship operations. Guest services was trained to gently steer them toward real, approved facilities that offered similar experiences. When I filed the final incident report, it was written in plain terms, downplaying the stranger parts of the story. The mystery deck was explained away as guest confusion, made worse by rare elevator glitches that let people into cruise sections by mistake. The official solution was to tighten security around restricted decks and do a better job educating passengers about the ship layout. Nowhere in the report was there any mention of impossible hallways, measurement errors, or the fact that some passengers had been able to use those facilities as if they were real. Kaylin herself finished her cruise without any more problems. But as she disembarked, she casually told me she had been using that same Deck 7 library every day until the end of the trip. She even expressed disappointment that the space wouldn't be there on future cruises, which meant from her point of view, it had stayed open and available the whole time. Others who made similar reports also claimed they could still visit those spaces with no trouble. This case made one thing very clear. Our normal methods of investigation don't work when reality itself becomes unreliable. Standard ship protocols assume the vessel's design is fixed, measurable, and consistent. But when passengers walk into spaces that cannot exist and even record them on their devices, there is no system in place to explain or handle it. Later sailings of the Norwegian Epic continued to bring in scattered reports of the same kind, though fewer after the company improved its passenger orientation programs. The ship itself passed every safety test and inspection with no signs of hidden areas, while guest services staff learned how to acknowledge strange claims without making them official. If anyone now says they found a Deck O, or room that doesn't match the plans, they're simply redirected to real facilities that fit their needs. For those passengers, the strange areas remain just as real as any part of the ship, but for the company, they are written off as misunderstandings. The deeper truth of what causes these experiences is still left unsolved, with no answers found even after countless reviews. Music. My 8 years working as a junior marine engineer on celebrity cruise line ships taught me one thing. Engine room work runs on rules and patterns that never change. Every engine, every generator, every system has a strict routine, and every single action is documented and monitored. Our communications with the bridge are locked into redundant channels, and every word said is recorded for safety checks. On the Celebrity Constellation, which carries over 3,000 people, everything is tied together by advanced computer systems that constantly manage the engines, the course, and the fuel. But what happened on one transatlantic crossing in November 2023 shook my entire understanding of those rules and exposed me to something I never thought possible. That NY shift was the night watch, midnight to 8 a.m., sitting in the engine control room. That's the heart of the ship, the place where you monitor propulsion, generators, and keep constant contact with the bridge. Standard duty was simple. Keep watch on system levels, follow any orders from the bridge, and log every detail. On the third night, somewhere about 400 miles northeast of the Azores, I received a call through the bridge intercom. The voice on the line identified itself exactly the way the officer of the watch would, complete with the right codes and the proper language. The order was clear. Change course 15 degrees starboard and slow the engines from 22 knots to 18. Everything about it sounded normal, official, and routine. Guest services was trained to gently steer them toward real, approved facilities that offered similar experiences. When I filed the final incident report, it was written in plain terms, downplaying the stranger parts of the story. The mystery deck was explained away as guest confusion, made worse by rare elevator glitches that let people into cruise sections by mistake. The official solution was to tighten security around restricted decks and do a better job educating passengers about the ship layout. Nowhere in the report was there any mention of impossible hallways, measurement errors, or the fact that some passengers had been able to use those facilities as if they were real. Kaylin herself finished her cruise without any more problems. But as she disembarked, she casually told me she had been using that same Deck 7 library every day until the end of the trip. She even expressed disappointment that the space wouldn't be there on future cruises, which meant from her point of view, it had stayed open and available the whole time. Others who made similar reports also claimed they could still visit those spaces with no trouble. This case made one thing very clear. Our normal methods of investigation don't work when reality itself becomes unreliable. Standard ship protocols assume the vessel's design is fixed, measurable, and consistent. But when passengers walk into spaces that cannot exist and even record them on their devices, there is no system in place to explain or handle it. Later sailings of the Norwegian Epic continued to bring in scattered reports of the same kind, though fewer after the company improved its passenger orientation programs. The ship itself passed every safety test and inspection with no signs of hidden areas, while guest services staff learned how to acknowledge strange claims without making them official. If anyone now says they found a Deck O, or room that doesn't match the plans, they are simply redirected to real facilities that fit their needs. For those passengers, the strange areas remain just as real as any part of the ship, but for the company, they are written off as misunderstandings. The deeper truth of what causes these experiences is still left unsolved, with no answers found even after countless reviews. Music. My 8 years working as a junior marine engineer on Celebrity Cruise Line ships taught me one thing. Engine room work runs on rules and patterns that never change. Every engine, every generator, every system has a strict routine, and every single action is documented and monitored. Our communications with the bridge are locked into redundant channels, and every word said is recorded for safety checks. On the Celebrity Constellation, which carries over 3,000 people, everything is tied together by advanced computer systems that constantly manage the engines, the course, and the fuel. But what happened on one transatlantic crossing in November 2023 shook my entire understanding of those rules and exposed me to something I never thought possible, and why shift was the night watch, midnight to 8 a.m., sitting in the engine control room. That's the heart of the ship, the place where you monitor propulsion, generators, and keep constant contact with the bridge. Standard duty was simple. Keep watch on system levels, follow any orders from the bridge, and log every detail. On the third night, somewhere about 400 miles northeast of the Azores, I received a call through the bridge intercom. The voice on the line identified itself exactly the way the officer of the watch would, complete with the right codes and the proper language. The order was clear. Change course 15 degrees starboard and slow the engines from 22 knots to 18. Everything about it sounded normal, official, and routine. The voice never identified itself, never explained how it knew, but spoke with perfect maritime language and a clear understanding of ship operations. Official reports called them communication anomalies and marked them for ongoing monitoring. Extra security measures were added. Verification procedures for every command, additional recording equipment, and strict reporting of anything unusual. Still, no one could explain where the transmissions were coming from. Even though the investigation never reached any clear conclusion, the voice kept coming back. Each time, its warnings lined up with bridge decisions made minutes later, as if it was always one step ahead of reality itself. On one hand, this made operations safer. We had advanced knowledge of trouble, which gave us time to react before things escalated. But on the other hand, it left everyone unsettled. If we couldn't trace the source, did that mean someone or something had tapped into our systems? Was it interference, or something else entirely? For engineers and officers, it was a constant balance between acting on valuable information and worrying about security breaches. Modern ships rely on complex systems linked to satellites, networks, and advanced monitoring tools. That interconnected web makes communication fast and precise, but also opens cracks for unknown signals to slip through. The rules we follow assume all commands come from real, verified sources. Yet here we were, facing a situation where anonymous orders were not only correct, but life-saving. There was no guidance on how to handle communications that couldn't be traced but still proved right. It became a puzzle. How do you protect a ship if ignoring the voice means risking danger, but following it means trusting something you can't explain? The whole situation exposed just how fragile even the most advanced systems can be when they FAC. The unknown. The case showed that modern maritime operations are far more complicated than they appear on the surface. Technology, automation, and constant monitoring give us confidence, but they also create scenarios no one planned for. Traditional rules don't cover what to do when an unidentified voice gives orders that end up being correct. It was a reminder that in the middle of the ocean, sometimes the greatest threats don't come from storms or collisions, but from things that can't be explained. Music, 15 years working as a senior security analyst for Carnival Corporation, taught me one thing. Passenger overboard cases usually follow a clear script. There are established steps, proven systems, and trained crews ready to respond. Modern cruise ships are equipped with highly sensitive overboard detection systems, complete camera coverage of outer decks, and crew drills designed to act fast when someone goes missing. The moment someone crosses a rail, alarms trigger instantly. Search and rescue protocols kick in within minutes, and every detail gets logged in precise reports. The Carnival Horizon, one of the most advanced ships in the fleet, had a spotless safety record with crews who knew exactly how to handle emergencies. But during one sailing through the Southern Caribbean in January 2024, I encountered a case that broke every rule I thought I understood about passenger safety, and uncovered a gap in our surveillance that I didn't think was even possible. Jazza Martinez, a solo traveler from Miami, had booked herself a week-long cruise in a standard balcony cabin on Deck 6. She wasn't new to cruising. She'd sailed 4 times before over the past 3 years, and her record showed no history of unusual behavior. On board, she seemed like the perfect passenger. She joined scheduled activities, called family through the ship's internet, and moved around the vessel in ways that matched ordinary guest patterns. She never once visited the medical center, never lodged a complaint with staff, and gave us no reason to think anything was wrong. For 3 days, her vacation was as uneventful as any other guest's. But on the 4th day, between Barbados and St. Lucia, about 60 miles from land, she simply vanished. The first red flag came when she missed her prepaid shore excursion in St. Lucia. She had booked it 2 days earlier and confirmed it, so it was strange when she didn't show up. Staff tried calling her cabin phone, then paged her through ship-wide announcements. No answer. Finally, guest services sent personnel to check her cabin. Using the master key, they unlocked the door and found the room empty. Nothing was out of place. Her personal belongings were untouched, her bag unpacked, and her clothes for the excursion neatly laid out on the bed. There was no sign of panic or trouble. Most unsettling of all, her door had been locked from the inside before staff entered, which meant she had left voluntarily, locking it behind her. Standard missing passenger procedures were activated immediately. Ship security was notified. Search teams spread across every deck, and manned overboard systems were reviewed for recent alerts. I oversaw the entire process, coordinating with officers, housekeeping staff, and crew to sweep the vessel top to bottom. But the initial search found nothing. Jazin wasn't in any public areas, she wasn't in restricted zones, and she wasn't anywhere the ship's systems could track. Her cabin showed no forced entry, no struggle, no reason to think she had been planning to disappear. It was as if she had walked out of a locked room and vanished into thin air. That was when the security camera review began, and it was there that the first major cracks in the case began to show. Our CCTV system covers everything: hallways, staircases, elevators, decks. ING should have gone unseen. And yet, somehow, that is exactly what happened. When I checked the surveillance footage from Jocelyn's hallway and nearby areas, I found something deeply unsettling. There were unexplained gaps in the recordings that lined up perfectly with the time she vanished. Everything looked normal until 11:47 p.m. on January 15th. The cameras showed people moving around as usual, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, at 11:48, the footage from Deck 6, Section B, where a cabin was, suddenly turned into corrupted static. The interference lasted exactly 14 minutes. During that stretch, none of the 8 cameras covering her area recorded anything usable. It was as if someone had erased a crucial piece of time. Technical teams quickly checked the cameras and systems, but every piece of equipment was fully functional. There were no signs of mechanical issues, electrical failure, or tampering. The ship's storage system was running normally too. What made it even stranger was that all other parts of the ship had uninterrupted footage at the same time. The disruption seemed to target only the cameras near Jocelyn's cabin, raising the possibility of either advanced electronic interference or an incredibly rare system failure. The ship's man-overboard detection systems added another layer of confusion. These systems are designed with advanced motion sensors to monitor the ocean around the vessel. If someone falls overboard, they immediately send alerts and trigger rescue protocols within seconds. But during the time frame of Jocelyn's disappearance, there were no alerts, no activations, no signals at all. If she had fallen, or even jumped, the system should have caught it instantly. The complete absence of detection suggested only 2 possibilities. Either she never entered the water, or the system itself failed at the worst possible moment. Standard procedure. Residential required immediate Coast Guard notification when a passenger went missing under such circumstances. I reported Jocelyn's case directly to the United States Coast Guard Rescue Coordination Center in Miami. Within hours, aircraft and ships were dispatched to search the ocean where the Horizon had sailed during the critical window. For 72 hours, the search covered more than 1,500 square miles of sea using multiple planes, 2 cutters, and even commercial ships that volunteered to help. The weather was clear, visibility perfect, and every grid of water thoroughly scanned. Yet not a single trace of Jocelyn appeared. Not in the water, on nearby shores, or on emergency rafts. The total lack of results only deepened the mystery, supporting the evidence that she had not gone overboard in any normal way. While the Coast Guard worked tirelessly, I shifted the investigation toward other possibilities. Could she have left the ship secretly at an earlier port? Passenger lists and immigration logs showed no signs of that. Still, I combed through all security footage from our port stops and reviewed shore excursion data. Every record confirmed she had joined activities at both Curacao and Aruba, and she was always seen reboarding the ship before departure, scanning her ID card checkpoints. Immigration officers confirmed she never tried to exit permanently or raise suspicion about leaving. Witnesses, including fellow passengers and tour guides, describe her as perfectly normal and cheerful during excursions. But things took a sharp and unexpected turn when I found out her passenger ID card had been used after she was reported missing. The logs showed access to the gym, library, and buffet during the exact hours we were searching the ship for her. This meant either she was somehow evading detection despite the sweep, or someone else had possession of her card. I immediately tightened security, stationing personnel in the areas where her card had been scanned and ramping up monitoring. G of all entry points. But strangely, once these measures went into effect, the card activity stopped altogether, as if whoever was using it knew we were onto them. Digging deeper into the card system made things even more suspicious. While the records showed her card being used, the movement patterns were impossible for one person. For instance, her card was scanned at the fitness center on Deck 12, and then almost simultaneously at the library on Deck 5. Traveling between those places normally takes at least 8 minutes. Yet the system registered them within seconds. This pointed to either card cloning with advanced technology or deliberate tampering with the ship's security systems. Either possibility was alarming and far beyond a simple case of a missing guest. It suggested either criminal activity or a breach of the ship's technology itself. When I filed these reports, corporate security responded immediately, dispatching additional investigators to join me. This team included cyber experts, access control specialists, and seasoned maritime investigators familiar with unusual shipboard cases. Their arrival marked a major shift in the investigation, especially when new evidence emerged that changed everything. During a deep dive into passenger records and crew reports, investigators found that Jocelyn's case wasn't the only strange event on this voyage. 3 other passengers had reported bizarre experiences that seemed connected. They weren't missing, but each of them described memory gaps and periods of disorientation they couldn't explain. They recalled losing track of several hours during evenings on the ship, unable to account for where they had been or what they had done. Some even said they woke up in their cabins with no memory of how they got there. What tied their stories together was even more chilling. During the same time, they experienced these blackouts. Their passenger ID cards showed activity across different parts of the ship that they had no memory of visiting. Yet the case revealed something larger, that no matter how advanced, ship security must constantly evolve to stay ahead of criminals who adapt just as quickly. It was a stark reminder that passenger safety in today's complex maritime world depends on constant awareness, relentless updates to security, and a willingness to face unsettling truths about vulnerabilities no one expects to find on a vacation at sea. Music. 12 years managing shore excursion operations for Princess Cruises taught me that passenger transport between ship and shore relies on strict safety systems with multiple backups. Modern cruise ships use certified tender boats built for tough conditions, with trained crews who follow tested procedures and communication links that ensure constant contact with the main vessel. Whenever a port cannot accommodate direct docking, tender operations are the only safe way to get passengers ashore. The Crown Princess, where I worked, has one of the strongest safety records in the industry, with thousands of successful transfers carried out by seasoned crew. But what happened during our Mediterranean voyage in September 2023 shattered every certainty I held about tender safety and left me questioning the very limits of maritime search and rescue. Indiana Williams joined the 12-day Mediterranean cruise as part of a cultural heritage tour, traveling from Rome to Barcelona with scheduled stops in Naples, Sicily, the French Riviera, and finally Barcelona. She was an experienced traveler, familiar with cruise routines and excursion protocols. Her group of 24 passengers had signed up for archaeology and history tours that required tender transport to destinations unreachable from large cruise ports. On day 7, the Crown Princess anchored 2 miles offshore from Portofino, Italy, since the harbor was too shallow for docking. Tender operations began at 8 a.m., with 4 boats running non-stop between ship and shore. Each vessel could carry 50 passengers plus 3 crew members, a certified operator, a safety officer, and a coordinator to manage boarding and disembarking. Indiana's group was placed on the 3rd tender, scheduled to leave at 9:15, along with 26 other passengers traveling independently. At T9:15 sharp, Princess Express 3 left the Crown Princess with 49 passengers and 3 crew aboard. The journey usually took just 18 minutes. Radio contact was required every 10 minutes to confirm safety, weather conditions, and passenger counts. At 9:25, the crew radioed in as scheduled, reporting smooth sailing and calm seas. But when the next check-in was due at 9:35, no call came. Repeated attempts from the ship went unanswered. I immediately activated missing tender protocols, which called for visual confirmation of the vessel, coordination with the other tenders, and alerting the Italian Coast Guard if contact couldn't be made within 15 minutes. Scans from the ship's decks revealed nothing. The 3 other tenders nearby were contacted. All confirmed normal operations, but reported no sighting of the missing boat, even though they had traveled the same route minutes apart. By 9:52, the Italian Coast Guard had been notified, and the search and rescue began at once. Aircraft and ships were deployed to sweep the waters between the Crown Princess and Portofino. Helicopters scanned coastlines and open water, while surface vessels searched systematically using sonar and visual sweeps. With calm seas, clear skies, and perfect visibility, the conditions could not have been better for spotting a 50-foot tender. Yet 6 hours passed with no sign of the Princess Express 3, its passengers, or crew. Over 100 square miles of ocean were covered, but nothing surfaced. During the ongoing search, I reviewed manifests and assignments to Con, firm who was aboard. Indiana's tour group was made up of seasoned travelers in good health, ranging in age from 45 to 72, none of whom had conditions that might complicate an emergency. The independent travelers matched typical cruise demographics. The crew members were highly skilled. Operator Marco Salvetti had 18 years of maritime experience. Safety Officer Patricia Chun had overseen more than 2,000 successful transfers, and Passenger Coordinator James Morrison was trained in evacuation protocols. With no radio calls, no distress signals, and no emergency beacons activated, the situation pointed to either catastrophic equipment failure or something that prevented the crew from using their systems at all. Italian authorities widened the search, factoring in currents, wind, and possible drift paths. The next day, aircraft spotted debris about 12 miles northwest of Portofino. Life preservers marked with Princess Cruises logo, fiberglass fragments matching tender construction, and personal belongings identified by passengers' families were recovered. But no bodies, survivors, or intact parts of the vessel were found. The debris suggested that Princess Express 3 had suffered catastrophic failure, sinking quickly and scattering passengers and crew across a vast area. Despite every effort, the sea gave up no further answers, leaving the fate of those aboard lost in one of the most baffling maritime disappearances I have ever encountered. However, when maritime engineers studied the pieces of debris that were recovered, they couldn't find any signs of an explosion, collision, or major mechanical problem that would normally explain the total destruction of a modern tender boat. The fiberglass pieces they examined actually showed signs of slow wear and aging rather than sudden impact or collapse. Search and rescue teams continued looking for 8 full days, supported by the Italian Coast Guard, French Maritime Services, and international rescue centers. They used advanced sonar systems, underwater robots, and detailed sweeps of the ocean floor where debris had been discovered, but they found no trace of the missing hull, the passengers, or the crew. When the first round of searches failed to give any real answers, the cruise line's headquarters sent in accident investigators. Marine safety experts, tender boat builders, and specialists in maritime accidents reviewed maintenance logs, safety procedures, and equipment records to see if anything could explain what happened. They found that Princess Express 3 had been given a complete safety inspection just 3 weeks before it vanished, with every system certified as safe and in line with international maritime standards. Weather reports also confirmed that the sea and sky were completely calm during the tender's scheduled trip, with no unusual waves, storms, or currents that could have posed a threat to passenger safety. The investigation also looked into the chance of criminal activity, such as piracy, hijacking, or terrorism that could explain why the boat and its passengers disappeared without a trace. But no warnings have been issued in the Mediterranean region, no groups claimed responsibility, and no ransom demands or threats ever surfaced. The lack of communication, political statements, or criminal involvement pointed away from deliberate hostile actions. Investigators then considered whether a navigation mistake could have sent the tender in the wrong direction. A mechanical problem might have caused it to sink before anyone could call for help, or even if it had collided with something unknown in the water. But none of these ideas fully explained the missing passengers, the scattered debris, or the total silence from distress systems that were designed to work even in emergencies. In the end, the official report labeled it as an unexplained maritime accident, with no clear cause found in the available evidence. Authorities declared that Princess Express 3, along with its 49 passengers and 3 crew members, had been lost at sea during a routine trip under normal conditions for reasons that remain a mystery. Families of the missing were later given official declarations of presumed death, as required by maritime law. Afterward, new safety steps were introduced, such as making GPS tracking mandatory for every tender boat, adding more frequent communication checks during passenger transfers, and requiring extra safety gear on vessels that operate where help might not be close by. Crew training was also expanded to cover better emergency communication skills and evacuation techniques for worst-case scenarios. Even with these changes, the biggest questions about Indiana's disappearance and the loss of everyone aboard Princess Express 3 were left without answers. The case showed just how limited maritime search and rescue efforts can be when an entire vessel disappears without sending a single distress call or leaving behind solid evidence. For cruise passengers taking tender boats to shore, the tragedy highlighted the reality that even with modern systems, sea travel carries risks that no safety plan can fully erase. Though tender operations have strong safety records, with millions of passengers carried safely each year, the total disappearance of Princess Express 3 serves as a chilling reminder that the ocean holds dangers that can't always be controlled. Current safety rules are built on the assumption that if something goes wrong, the boat will stay afloat long enough for rescue crews to arrive, and there will be enough wreckage to help piece together what happened. When those assumptions fail, passengers and crew are left almost defenseless against the unknown. The case file for Princess Express 3 is still open with Italian maritime officials and international investigators who continue to monitor for any new findings. Periodic searches are still carried out in the waters where debris was once found, and systems remain alert for anything that could finally explain how 49 passengers and 3 crew members disappeared forever during a simple shore excursion. Music, 7 years working as a safety compliance officer with Royal Caribbean International showed me that emergency drills are guided by strict international rules with precise timing, full documentation, and mandatory participation from every passenger. The SALAS Convention, also known as the Safety of Life at Sea Agreement, requires cruise ships to hold regular muster drills where passengers are taught how to use life jackets, where to gather in emergencies, and how evacuation would take place. These drills are always held in daylight, announced across the ship, and recorded carefully for safety authorities. The Voyager of the Seas has one of the best safety track records, with crew training and preparedness levels that go beyond global standards. But what Dale and Crawford went through on our Western Caribbean trip in April 2024 completely shook my faith in what I thought I knew about these drills, raising questions about safety that still stay with me today. Dalen had booked a basic inside cabin on Deck 6 for a 7A cruise from Fort Lauderdale, traveling alone to celebrate finishing his engineering degree. His profile showed that he had never cruised before, so he wasn't familiar with muster drills or safety steps. When he boarded, guest services gave him a full orientation packet with his emergency procedures, muster station details, and maps of safety equipment around the ship. On the third night, while the ship was between Cozumel and Jamaica, around 150 miles away from land, Dalen was suddenly jolted awake at 2:37 a.m. by the blaring general alarm. 7 short blasts followed by 1 long meant a mandatory emergency drill, ordering all passengers and crew to go immediately to their muster stations for evacuation practice. Emergency lighting came on, and the loudspeakers told everyone to dress warmly, grab their life jackets, and head to the proper assembly areas. Normally, these drills only happen in daylight when visibility is good and staff levels are high to guide passengers safely. Midnight drills almost never happen unless it's a real emergency. But this announcement specifically called it a mandatory drill, complete with demonstrations. Dalen grabbed his life jacket and made his way to muster station E on Deck 4, just like he had been told during embarkation. The halls were busy with passengers heading to their stations, crew members guiding them at intersections, and the ship lit by the emergency lights. Everything seemed orderly, just like a real drill, and at muster station E, Dalen saw about 200 other passengers gathered, with crew leading a full demonstration. They explained life jackets, evacuation routes, and emergency steps in the same way they did in daytime drills. Everything appeared perfectly normal, except for the strange timing in the middle of the night. While the drill was happening, I was making my usual compliance checks, moving between muster stations to ensure crew were following rules, passengers were participating, and equipment was working. But when I got to muster station E, I was stunned. The area was completely empty. No passengers, no crew, no drill, and no emergency lighting. Regulations demand exact records of drills, so the situation was immediately alarming. I called the bridge to confirm what was happening, only to be told that no emergency drill was in progress, and the alarm had not been triggered at all. The bridge logs confirmed there had been no alarms, no announcements, and no safety activity since the evening before. All systems were showing normal overnight operation. No drills, no alarms, no emergencies. I reached out to other safety officers across the ship, and every single one confirmed the same thing. No drills, no assemblies, nothing unusual at all. The ship was running normally with most passengers asleep. Then ate tea that moment. The seriousness of the situation became clear. If unauthorized drills were somehow happening without approval, it could lead to mass panic, confusion, and even danger for passengers. And yet, everything official said no drill had ever taken place that I went to muster station E to check if what Dallin had described was a mistake with the equipment, a misunderstanding, or maybe even something done by crew members without permission. When I got there, I saw Dallin standing completely alone, wearing his life jacket, looking lost and confused because no other passengers or crew were there with him. He swore he had just been part of a full emergency drill with nearly 200 passengers and several crew members running safety demonstrations. He even said the whole thing lasted around 35 minutes and ended with the usual announcement telling people to return to their cabins. But everything around me told a different story. The area looked untouched. The emergency gear was still packed away neatly, and none of the safety tools had been set out for use. Even the emergency lighting had never been switched on. Everything was in its normal nighttime setting, as though nothing at all had happened. I asked Dallin to give me more details, hoping to figure out why his story didn't match the evidence. He gave precise descriptions of crew members leading the drill, their uniforms, the safety gear they used, and the way they presented the demonstrations. The way he described it all matched exactly how Royal Caribbean actually runs. Their safety drills. His knowledge wasn't vague, it was exact, almost like he had really been through a real drill. The strangest part was when I checked the crew schedules. The very people Dallin described as running the drill were indeed the actual safety officers assigned to that muster station, but all of them had been off duty at the time. They were in their cabins, asleep, and no drills had been scheduled. No one had authorization to hold one in the middle of the night. I then checked the security cameras to see if I could catch proof of what Dallin had seen. The footage only made things more confusing. It clearly showed him leaving his cabin at 2:41 a.m. and heading straight for muster station E. He walked alone through empty hallways, no other passengers anywhere in sight. The cameras then showed him at the station, staying there for 38 minutes. Exactly the time he claimed the drill lasted. But on the recording, he was standing by himself the entire time. No passengers, no crew, no lights, no equipment, nothing. It was as if he was just waiting there in silence. But when we analyzed the audio from the surveillance, things became unsettling. The sound picked up Dallin speaking as if he were talking to someone, answering questions, responding to instructions, even commenting on safety demonstrations. His words matched perfectly with what would happen in a real emergency drill. The strange part was that the voices he claimed to be answering were never recorded. It sounded like he was taking part in something real, but only he could hear it. Because of how unusual it was, medical staff were brought in to check him over. They tested everything: drugs, alcohol, medical conditions, and even psychological evaluations. But nothing explained his experience. He wasn't under the influence, had no cognitive issues, and showed no signs of mental health problems that could cause vivid hallucinations. His story never wavered. Every detail remained consistent. What stood out most was that he seemed to know far more about the drills than any first-time cruiser ever should. His descriptions weren't the kind you could just make up after a quick glance at orientation papers. He spoke with the knowledge of someone who had truly been trained. The investigation was expanded to see if the ship's systems themselves could have caused this bizarre event. Specialists checked communication systems, alarms, and equipment to see if strange signals could have somehow reached Dallin without being logged or recorded. That's when they found something odd. Around the time Dallin said the drill happened, there were unusual electromagnetic readings in the area of muster station E. The signals didn't match anything the ship used and seemed focused only in that space. These signals ran on frequencies that could possibly affect how people perceive things, even though normal surveillance couldn't detect them. What made this even more interesting was that muster station. He sat directly above the ship's main communication array and next to high-power navigation systems that constantly ran while the ship was moving. It created a mix of electronic activity unlike anywhere else on board. Still, no one could explain how that could create something as detailed and interactive as what Dallin described. In the end, the official report simply called it an isolated incident with no clear cause. The crew installed special monitoring equipment around muster station to watch for more of those strange electromagnetic signals. They were also trained to better handle passengers who might experience unusual events like this. Dallin finished his cruise without anything else strange happening, but he stood firm in saying that he had truly taken part in a real drill. He described it with total confidence, even though no proof supported him. This case revealed how limited normal investigation methods are when something happens that leaves no physical evidence. Safety procedures are built around the idea that every action can be seen, recorded, and confirmed. But when a passenger swears they experienced something in detail and nothing shows up in the evidence, there's little guidance on what to do next. For passengers, this shows how important it is to report things quickly and record as much detail as possible, since unusual patterns might be uncovered that way. Maritime safety rules assume drills only happen through authorized, scheduled processes with full documentation. But if something happens outside those rules, the system has no answers. The strange signals near muster station are still being monitored, and experts are still trying to connect them to what Dallin went through. Nothing final has been proven, but the case forced new thinking about how ship technology might interact with human perception in ways we don't yet understand. Music. 9 years working as head of guest services for Holland America Line taught me that passenger safety complaints usually followed the same patterns, and we had standard steps to solve them. Cruise ships today have strong security, with electronic key systems, cameras in the halls, and crew training to stop anyone from entering cabins without permission. If a guest ever reported a break-in, the rules were clear: act fast, collect evidence, and involve law enforcement if needed. The MS New Amsterdam had an excellent security record, with advanced systems and skilled officers who knew how to handle problems. But what Talon Brooks reported on our Alaska Inside Passage cruise in June 2024 showed me that our safety wasn't as airtight as I thought. What happened in her cabin revealed hidden weaknesses and exposed criminal activity that had been going on for months, without anyone noticing. Talon had booked a veranda suite on Deck 7 for a 7-day Alaska trip, traveling with her elderly mother for a family reunion. She had cruised many times before, knew how safety worked, and was familiar with normal security. Her suite came with luxury features, separate living space, elegant furnishings, and even upgraded security for privacy. On the third night, while the ship moved through the Inside Passage about 50 miles from Juneau, Talon woke up at 3:47 a.m. to find a stranger inside her cabin's living room. The figure moved quietly, going through her belongings while her mother slept in the bedroom. The person looked like a crew member in uniform and acted like they knew exactly where to search. Talon didn't move or make a sound, afraid that confronting them would put her and her mother in danger. She just watched as the intruder carefully went through luggage, documents, and valuables, using a small flashlight to avoid turning on the lights. It was clear they weren't just stealing at random. They were after certain things like jewelry, electronics, and travel papers. After about 12 minutes, Talon quietly used the emergency communication button in her suite to call security, hoping they'd come without alerting the intruder. But when she pressed it, nothing happened. The system was dead. No answer. No signal. Her only lifeline to security had been cut off. The intruder finished going through the suite and quietly left through the main door, using what looked like a standard crew key card to unlock it. The way the person moved, calm, quick, and efficient, showed they were no amateur. They clearly knew how to break into guest cabins without being noticed and seemed familiar with how passengers usually behaved at night. The whole intrusion took about 15 minutes, making it clear this wasn't random theft but a well-organized operation. As soon as the stranger left, Talon picked up the suite's phone and called guest services to report what had just happened and to demand an immediate response from security. But the desk told her they had no record of any emergency call from her suite. Even more alarming, the emergency button she had pressed earlier showed no signs of being activated in the system at all. That meant either something had gone wrong with the equipment or someone had deliberately tampered with the system to keep her from reaching help. Because premium suites always get top-level attention, I went to investigate her report myself. Guests in these cabins pay for luxury and privacy, so if someone managed to sneak into one, it was a serious security problem. I arrived at her suite at 4:23 a.m. and began asking questions right away. I interviewed both Talon and her mother carefully, trying to piece together exactly what had happened. Talon gave a strikingly detailed account of the intruder, what he wore, the gear he carried, and even how he searched the room. Her memory was clear, focused, and consistent, not the kind of thing someone would invent under stress. She described uniform details, the methodical way he moved, and how he gained access, all pointing to someone with real skill. Her mother admitted she had heard strange noises during the night too, though she had brushed them off as normal ship sounds. When I inspected the suite, I found quiet but convincing signs that backed Talon's story. Some personal belongings had been shifted ever so slightly from where they were left. Luggage zippers were moved, even though neither Talon nor her mother had touched them. Important documents showed signs of being handled, with faint fingerprints and new creases that hadn't been there before. It even looked as if they might have been photographed. Oddly enough, the intruder hadn't taken any jewelry or electronics of high value, which made it seem like theft wasn't the main reason for the break-in. When I checked the suite's electronic access records, the logs only showed Talon and her mother entering with their passenger key cards. There was no trace of crew access during the time she reported the intrusion. But further technical checks showed that the system had experienced sudden interruptions at exactly the same time the intruder entered. It didn't look like an accident. It looked like someone had cut into the system on purpose. Things became even more suspicious when we looked at the hallway cameras. The footage showed a crew member walking near the suite during the time of the incident. But the figure's face was hidden by the way the uniform was worn and how they moved. The timing of their movements matched Talon's account almost perfectly. Still, something didn't look right. The uniform had small, but noticeable differences from the standard Holland America outfit. The insignia was slightly altered, the accessories were not regulation, and they carried equipment that no crew member in passenger areas should have. It raised the chilling possibility that the person was either a crew member breaking the rules or someone impersonating crew with incredible detail. When I checked the duty rosters, I found no reason for any crew member to be near her suite that night. No cleaning, no maintenance, no guest service calls, nothing at all. That discovery pushed the investigation further. Soon it became clear that Talon's experience wasn't a one-time incident. Other passengers staying in luxury suites had quietly reported strange things over the past 3 months. Belongings moved, odd noises at night, and suspected intrusions. Each report had been dismissed at the time as passenger error or confusion. But when put together, the pattern was undeniable. Someone had been deliberately targeting premium cabins, especially those with elderly guests who often carried expensive items. Whoever was behind it had access to passenger information that only insiders could know. Technical experts combed through the ship's security systems and found something shocking. For months, someone had been secretly manipulating the electronic locks, disabling cameras, and interfering with emergency calls to carry out these intrusions without being caught. The break in the case came when security discovered altered key cards hidden among crew members who had no authorization to access passenger cabins. These cards had been reprogrammed to open any suite on board, while bypassing the usual logs that record crew activity. Creating such cards required high-level access and insider knowledge, which meant people who understood the ship's security systems were involved. The next port. Corporate security teams boarded the ship to conduct a deeper investigation. What they uncovered was a criminal network operating under everyone's noses. Several crew members were part of it, sneaking into cabins not to steal valuables directly, but to gather sensitive information. They photographed IDs, copied financial records, and collected data about jewelry, electronics, and even passenger travel plans and home addresses. This information was then sent to accomplices on shore who used it to commit identity theft, fraud, and even burglaries back at passengers' homes while they were away on vacation. Law enforcement arrested 8 people, including crew, outside as associates, and insiders who have been leaking passenger details. The operation had been running for more than a year and a half, across multiple ships, with hundreds of victims who never even realized their vacations had been used against them. The findings shook the cruise industry. Standard security measures, like key cards and cameras, were useless against criminals with inside help and technical skill. The group knew exactly how to bypass safeguards, how to time their movements, and how to blend into ship operations without leaving traces. Immediate changes were made. Access control systems were upgraded, cameras improved, background checks tightened, and extra security staff were added to luxury cabin areas at night. Passengers were also taught to stay alert, lock valuables, and report anything unusual right away. The official investigation pushed industry-wide reforms, requiring all cruise lines to add stricter screening, better technology, and mandatory audits to prevent similar breaches. The case proved that cruise ship security has to constantly evolve to keep up with new kinds of threats. For guests, especially those in high-end suites, Talon's ordeal is a reminder to stay cautious and aware, and to always use safes, locks, and security features on board. The network that had been stealing identities and targeting passengers was taken down, prosecuted under maritime and racketeering laws, and the guilty parties were given heavy prison sentences. The case also set a legal precedent for handling organized crime at sea, showing that even the most advanced systems can be exploited by those with enough access and skill. 16 years as a navigation officer with Norwegian Cruise Line taught me that navigation systems are among the most reliable tools at sea, working with GPS, electronic charts, and even traditional celestial backups. Ships constantly track their position with several overlapping systems and work with port authorities and weather services to keep every course precise. When a ship goes off its charted path, it's usually because a trained officer made a conscious decision, never because the systems were wrong. The Norwegian Epic had always maintained spotless navigation records, with cutting-edge equipment and experienced officers. But what happened during our transatlantic repositioning cruise in October 2023 challenged everything I thought I knew about how dependable those systems were, and left me questioning electronic accuracy in ways that still affect how I approach navigation today. Dion Patterson, serving as third officer on the Epic's 14-day voyage from Barcelona to Miami, worked directly under my supervision. He monitored the bridge systems, updated electronic charts, and coordinated with ports. Since this crossing carried fewer passengers, it gave us extra time to train and focus on navigation. On the 8th day, while sailing about 600 miles southwest of the Azores, Dion noticed something alarming during his 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. watch. The ship's GPS put us roughly 400 miles northeast of where we actually were. When compared with celestial navigation and manual calculations based on course and speed, the difference was massive, far outside what GPS errors should ever show. It looked like a serious malfunction that required immediate action. Following protocol, I began a full check of every navigation system. We ran diagnostics on the GPS receivers, tested the electronic chart systems, and compared the data with backup tools. But the strangest part was that although our electronic systems agreed with each other, they all showed the same wrong position for 100 miles off course. It wasn't just one broken device. Every piece of modern navigation equipment was giving us the same false reading, while our old-fashioned methods said something very different. The GPS receivers showed strong signals from satellites, all appearing normal and accurate. The electronic charts displayed the correct depth readings and hazards for the ship's supposed position, and the automatic identification system broadcasted our location to other vessels exactly as expected. Yet, when celestial navigation was used, taking sun and star sightings. The ship's true position matched the planned course, time of departure, heading, and speed, not the location the electronic systems were insisting on. Multiple officers checked with independent sextants and chronometers, and each time the results confirmed that the celestial fixes were accurate within the normal range for traditional methods. This created a bizarre and unsettling problem. Every electronic system agreed on one position, while every manual calculation proved we were hundreds of miles away from where the electronics claimed we were. Both sets of methods seemed to be working properly, but they completely contradicted each other about where the ship actually was. The captain was immediately informed and ordered a full diagnostic sweep of every navigation system, while also putting extra officers on manual watches to double-check our location with traditional methods. Specialists began a deep investigation of the GPS receivers, the electronic chart displays, and all integrated bridge equipment to figure out if there was some hidden malfunction. What they found was alarming. The GPS receivers were indeed receiving satellite signals, but those signals weren't real. They looked perfectly normal, but the data was foul. SE, tricking the equipment into placing the ship about 400 miles northeast of its actual location. This discovery pointed to GPS spoofing, a highly advanced electronic technique where false satellite signals are broadcast to mislead ships into believing their navigation systems are functioning correctly when in fact they're being fed lies. GPS spoofing is usually linked to military conflicts or restricted zones, never to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That made the situation even stranger. Who would be capable of pulling off something like this, and why here? No military exercises or territorial disputes were known in this part of the ocean, and nearby vessels reported their GPS working normally. That suggested the interference was targeting our ship specifically. The signals we were receiving weren't crude either. They were more advanced than anything typically seen, with precise timing, fake satellite constellations, and manipulated signal strength. This wasn't the kind of work done by pirates or criminals. It suggested the hand of a powerful, resourceful operator. Around the same time, Dion began noticing other strange glitches on the ship. The charts sometimes displayed ocean depths that didn't match either the spoof position or the real one. Weather systems were receiving forecasts that didn't line up with what we actually saw outside. Satellite communications flickered in and out, blocking normal reports to headquarters. This didn't look like random malfunctions. It looked like a coordinated attack aimed at disrupting multiple systems at once. The interference was far too advanced to be accidental. It wasn't just navigation. It was as if someone was testing how far they could reach into the ship's systems. Soon, reports came in from Norwegian Cruise Line headquarters that other ships in the fleet had also experienced odd navigation errors in the North Atlantic and the Mediterranean, though each case had been brushed off as equipment trouble. When compared, a chilling pattern emerged. It wasn't isolated at all. Corporate security rushed in investigators, who began piecing together the bigger picture. What they discovered was even more unnerving. The electronic interference wasn't random sabotage. It looked like surveillance. Whoever was behind this was forcing ships to rely on backup navigation methods, watching how crews reacted, and quietly collecting information about passengers, routing, and security procedures. Data about ship operations and even passenger details was being transmitted somewhere, though no one knew where or to whom. The level of sophistication pointed towards state-level involvement. Ordinary criminals wouldn't have access to technology like this. Federal maritime security agencies were alerted, and the investigation was immediately classified under national security. Details became restricted to only those with clearance. Meanwhile, Norwegian Cruise Line rolled out urgent new security measures, upgrading detection equipment to spot spoofing, encrypting communications, and training crews to respond to hostile electronic interference. Officers were reminded to practice traditional navigation regularly, because when the machines failed, sextants and star charts were the only things keeping us safe. The official report marked the issue as resolved through better equipment and procedures, but left the most pressing question unanswered. Who had done it, and why? Dion continued the voyage without further incidents. but his records of the anomalies became a cornerstone for how the company updated training and response protocols. The event exposed just how fragile modern navigation systems can be when faced with deliberate interference. It proved that reliance on GPS and electronics alone could be dangerous, and that only by keeping alive the older skills of celestial navigation and dead reckoning could officers be prepared for the unexpected. The case also showed how international waters, which are supposed to be safe for civilian ships, could suddenly become the testing ground for mysterious and powerful technologies. Maritime laws and assumptions about GPS reliability suddenly felt shaky when faced with something like this. The investigation is still ongoing under federal watch, with monitoring of ship systems to detect new threats. While most of the findings remain classified, the incident has already changed how cruise ships operate and how crews are trained. It stands as a reminder that technology, no matter how advanced, can be manipulated, and when it is, the safety of thousands depends on human skill and vigilance. Music, 11 years working as a food and beverage operations manager for Celebrity Cruises taught me that dining service follows precise schedules, set menu cycles, and carefully organized seating that all come together to create a smooth, predictable dining rhythm. A ship serves thousands of meals every day across multiple venues, and the entire process runs on carefully planned staffing and supply systems to keep quality consistent. Usually, if anything goes wrong, it's something simple, an equipment breakdown, a missing shipment, or a staffing mix-up that can be fixed with standard solutions. The Celebrity Constellation was no different, known for flawless service and skilled teams that fed more than 3,000 guests daily without a hitch. But what Kendrick Rodriguez experienced during our Mediterranean cruise in August 2024 didn't fit into any of the usual problems. It shook my idea of how routine dining operations really were and raised eerie questions about how time itself might behave at sea. Kendrick had booked a balcony stateroom for his 10-day Mediterranean voyage, traveling alone after retiring for a long career in aerospace engineering. He wasn't new to cruising. He'd sailed 3 times before, and he knew the flow of ship life well. He had chosen late dining at 8:30 each evening, assigned a table 34 in the main restaurant. On the 5th night, while the ship was docked in Barcelona, Kendrick stayed aboard and went to dinner as usual. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The dining room was arranged with its usual polished setup. The lighting and staff levels matched the evening service, and since many passengers chose to eat on shore that night, the atmosphere was calm. Kendrick was shown to his table by the maitre d', where he joined 7 other passengers and was given that evening's menu, themed around Mediterranean specialties to fit the itinerary. The dinner unfolded exactly as expected. Bread and drinks arrived first, then appetizers, then main dishes paired with wine. The conversation at the table flowed easily. People chatted about their day's excursions in Barcelona, upcoming plans for the French Riviera, and shared cruise stories. Kendrick joined in, enjoying both the company and the meal. By the time dessert and coffee were served, it felt like a full evening, wrapping up around 10:15, when most diners usually headed to entertainment or back to their cabins. But when Kendrick returned to his stateroom, something instantly felt wrong. His digital clock read 7:45, not 10:30. Confused, he checked his wristwatch. It too read 7:45. Somehow, nearly 3 hours had vanished during what he remembered as a perfectly normal dinner. Thinking maybe there had been a time zone change or ship clock reset, he called guest services. They assured him no such adjustment had been made. The ship had stayed on local time the entire day. That low, FT Kendrick unsettled. He began to question himself. Had he lost time, or was his memory playing tricks? Wondering if it was a health issue, he decided to go back down to the dining room to check. When he entered at what his watch showed as 8 o'clock, the restaurant was alive with service. Guests were being seated for the evening meal, and the maitre d' once again led him toward table 34. To his astonishment, sitting there were the exact same 7 passengers he had already shared dinner with just a short while before. However, the passengers around him acted as though they had never eaten together before and carried on with the exact same conversations he had already heard earlier in the evening. The menu was identical too: featuring the same Mediterranean dishes he had already chosen and eaten less than an hour ago. At first, Kendrick feared he might be having some kind of medical episode that was confusing his memory or sense of time. Still, he chose to stay through the dinner, carefully watching everything to figure out whether this was a trick of his mind, a health problem, or something much stranger happening around him. As the meal went on, everything unfolded exactly the way it had before. The food looked the same, the wine recommendations matched perfectly, and even the jokes and comments from the waiters came to the same points, as if the entire evening was being replayed. Kendrick tried to bring up topics from what he remembered of the earlier dinner, but the others reacted as if hearing them for the first time and repeated the same words and stories he had already heard. The level of detail in the repetition was unnerving, going far beyond what could be explained by normal service routines, that I first became aware of the situation when Kendrick quietly approached me in the dining room, saying he believed he was living through the same dinner for a second time in one night. He seemed calm, collected, and genuinely unsettled rather than intoxicated or confused. His story, though strange, did not match up with what our schedule showed, because according to Dine-In operations, the second seating had only just begun, and his first seating had ended right on schedule at 7:30. Kitchen logs confirmed that everything had run normally, with no unusual delays or duplicated service that might have explained his claim. Yet when I checked his dining record in the passenger services database, I found something that shook me. The system showed 2 charges for Kendrick that night, identical menus, wine choices, and service fees logged separately, only 45 minutes apart. That meant the computer had recorded him going through 2 dinners that were the same in every detail. The seating records added to the mystery. The dining system showed table 34 as being occupied in 2 different seating configurations during the second seating, and Kendrick's name appeared in both. This was impossible because one person couldn't physically sit in 2 versions of the same table at once without displacing other assigned passengers. The strangest part came when we reviewed the security camera footage. The recordings showed Kendrick entering the dining room at 8 o'clock, being seated at table 34, and enjoying dinner with his table mates. But the same cameras also showed him finishing an identical dinner with the same people at the same table about an hour earlier. The 2 sets of footage seemed to overlap, showing him in 2 places at once in what looked like a seamless loop of repeated events. Technicians examined the recording equipment, but there were no glitches, no tampered timestamps, no camera errors, nothing to explain how 2 complete dinners had been captured. Kendrick was evaluated by the ship's medical team to see if some illness or medication could explain his strange experience. They found nothing, no cognitive issues, no drugs that could alter his sense of time, and no mental health concerns that would cause repeated memories. During his exam, Kendrick described both dinners in extraordinary detail, recalling exact conversations, the sequence of food being served, and even predicting what staff would say or do during the second meal before it happened. His accuracy suggested he wasn't imagining things, but had truly gone through 2 versions of the same event. Because of this, the investigation expanded into ship systems to see if anything environmental could have caused such an anomaly. Specialists inspected electrical systems, ventilation, and electronic infrastructure to check for anything that might distort time perception. Their readings revealed unusual energy patterns in the dining room during the time frame of Kendrick's repeated meals. These fluctuations were strongest around table 34 and matched perfectly with the times he reported experiencing the duplicate dinners. The specialists couldn't explain how such energy fluctuations could create a full repetition of real experiences, including food being eaten, conversations being held, and staff performing their duties. The readings suggested something very abnormal was happening in that space, but not how it was possible, because the evidence pointed to something beyond normal ship operations. Corporate headquarters sent in consultants who specialized in temporal anomalies. These experts had worked on similar unexplained cases in other fields, though the details of their findings were kept classified under private research protocols. Officially, the incident was written off as a unique passenger case with no clear cause. Still, new monitoring equipment was installed in the dining room to detect further unusual energy spikes, and staff were trained on how to support passengers who reported strange time-related experiences. Afterward, Kendrick finished the cruise without repeating the same type of experience, though he admitted to NTS of déjà vu during ordinary activities aboard the ship. His meals returned to normal patterns, and no further duplicate dinners occurred. Yet, the monitoring devices continued to pick up occasional bursts of energy in the dining area, sometimes aligning with other passengers who reported minor oddities in their sense of time. The case revealed that traditional ship operations and monitoring systems have serious limits when faced with phenomena that break the usual rules of time and sequence. Cruise operations are built on the assumption that events happen in a straight, logical order that can always be tracked and recorded. But when passengers encounter experiences that contradict this, the systems we rely on provide no guidance on what to do. This case showed how critical it is to record every detail, timing, location, conversations, and observations, while offering support to those affected, even if no explanation is possible. While the true cause remains hidden, it proved that not all experiences at sea fit neatly into the expected flow of time. Cruise ship operations still assume everything runs inside normal timelines. But Kendrick's story is proof that sometimes the rules of time itself may not apply. When passengers share experiences that break the usual expectations of time and order, the normal ship procedures often cannot explain or properly handle them. The special monitoring devices that were placed in the main dining room still pick up strange time disturbances from time to time, and research into these mysteries is still being carried out under corporate programs. While the findings from the investigation remain secret, the strange events led to a better understanding of unusual passenger experiences and the creation of improved ways to respond to reports of time inconsistencies during cruise operations. After working 13 years as a senior medical technician for Princess Cruises, I thought I knew exactly how shipboard medical operations functioned. They follow strict rules, record everything, secure medications, and report every passenger or crew case. Cruise ships today carry advanced medical centers with professional doctors, nurses, and trained medical staff ready to handle anything from seasickness to major injuries that may need air evacuation. Every case is logged carefully, forwarded to corporate medical offices, and reviewed by regulators. The Grand Princess, in particular, had an excellent record, known for its skilled staff and top-quality equipment. But during a Pacific coastal cruise in December 2023, I came across something that shattered everything I thought I knew about cruise ship medicine. What I uncovered revealed months of hidden violations, covered up through false records and shocking negligence at the corporate level. In November 2023, a night shift technician named Jalen Torres began her job on the Grand Princess, working midnight to 8 a.m. shifts while also studying for her nursing degree. Her tasks included monitoring patients overnight, giving medicine under doctor supervision, checking equipment, and recording all medical activities according to international health rules. The Grand Princess's medical center was fully equipped to deal with major emergencies, with examination rooms, treatment areas, a pharmacy, diagnostic gear, and a controlled storage area for blood products, medicines, and biological samples. But only a few weeks into her shifts, Jalen stumbled upon something deeply disturbing. Around 3 a.m., while checking equipment, she saw the ship's head doctor, Marcus Kellerman, inside the medical storage area performing exams on what appeared to be bodies with no signs of life. The patients showed no response, no vital signs. According to the rules, any death on a ship must be immediately reported, documented, and to remain stored properly until arrangements can be made at the next port. Yet Dr. Kellerman appeared to be carrying out post-mortem exams and even collecting tissue samples without authorization or records. At first, Jalen thought maybe this was allowed under some special protocol she hadn't learned yet. But when she reviewed the records, there were no death reports, no orders for examinations, nothing that could explain what she had witnessed. The lack of records hinted at either major rule-breaking or intentional concealment. The next night, she kept watch more carefully, trying not to draw attention. This time she saw him performing full autopsies, taking samples with surgical tools, and even using specialized lab equipment to record findings. Gear she knew was not part of the ship's standard inventory. The precision of his work suggested advanced training in post-mortem procedures, far beyond what cruise medicine required. He carefully preserved organs and tissues, labeling them according to some system Jalen had never seen before. What unsettled her most was the presence of highly advanced devices, electron microscopes, tissue analyzers, and data storage systems that had been brought aboard secretly. These were expensive, highly specialized tools, showing clear signs of an organized operation. Even worse, Jalen soon realized there were more bodies in the storage area than any official report acknowledged. She counted at least 6 bodies, but the ship's records claimed no deaths had occurred on the voyage. This meant that passenger deaths were being hidden deliberately, breaking maritime law and international health standards. She tried to dig deeper into the computer system to identify the deceased and learn how they had died, but found her access blocked. Dr. Kellerman had keyed down the files to prevent others from discovering what was going on. Determined to find answers, she searched his office and uncovered hidden handwritten notes that told the full story. The records showed that at least 12 passengers and crew had died since the start of the cruise. Causes ranged from natural deaths and accidents to medical crises like heart attacks and breathing failures. But some reports suggested possible poisoning or exposure to unknown toxins. Even more disturbing, several deaths seemed to connect to contaminated food or water, pointing to a larger threat to everyone on board. Jalen realized this was not just a doctor breaking rules. It could be part of something far more dangerous. The secrecy, the hidden equipment, the locked records all suggested he was not acting alone. When she tried to report her findings through normal channels, she discovered her communication access had been cut off. This meant Dr. Kellerman likely knew she was investigating him and was actively preventing her from alerting others. With no other choice, she decided to go directly to the ship's captain during his morning rounds. But when she arrived at the bridge, she found the captain had already been told she was unstable, hallucinating, and unfit for duty. Dr. Kellerman had planted false reports to discredit her before she could speak out. Despite the smear campaign, Jalen presented the captain with photographs, hidden records, and even samples proving her claims. Faced with such evidence, the captain had no choice but to order a full security search. Kellerman was immediately suspended pending investigation. The search uncovered everything Jalen had described: concealed bodies, unauthorized equipment, and extensive evidence of secret autopsies. When investigators dug into Kellerman's past, they found a troubling history. He had been fired from previous jobs for the same type of unauthorized research, had lied about his credentials, and he had lost his medical license in multiple places for unethical work on human remains. Further investigation revealed the horrifying truth. This was not just one doctor acting alone. He was part of a criminal network trafficking human organs and tissues taken from deceased cruise ship passengers. These samples were sold on the black market for illegal research and transplant operations. The equipment, the secrecy, the access control, all of it had been arranged by outside groups working with crew members on board. Federal authorities arrested Kellerman and his partners, including other staff who helped him and land-based associates who arranged transport of the biological materials. The network had been operating for more than 2 years, targeting hundreds of deceased passengers and crew on different ships. The fallout was massive. Cruise lines were forced to make sweeping changes to medical protocols. Background checks for medical staff were tightened, audits were made mandatory, and medical storage areas were placed under strict security and monitoring. Real-time reporting systems were added so that deaths and emergencies could not be hidden, and outside inspectors were brought in for regular reviews. Medical staff were retrained to spot suspicious activities and report them immediately. The official investigation charged the network under maritime law, racketeering, and trafficking crimes. Kellerman and his accomplices were sentenced to long prison terms and heavy fines, setting legal precedents for prosecuting such crimes at sea. For passengers and crew, Jalen's discovery served as a chilling reminder of the importance of reporting anything suspicious. Crew's medical systems assume that doctors and staff act ethically and follow the rules. But when those assumptions are broken, the dangers can be extreme. The new oversight rules created after this case are still in place today, keeping closer watch on ship medical operations to prevent such horrors from happening again. While certain details of ongoing security remain classified, the case forced major changes and set new standards of safety. The network behind the harvesting was completely dismantled, its leaders imprisoned, and its crimes exposed to the world. The prosecutions proved that even criminal organizations hiding in the shadows of international waters could be taken down. It also showed the power of a single whistleblower brave enough to risk everything to tell the truth. Your sin